The village bully publicly mocked the 3 noble young ladies I had chosen, saying they couldn't carry a shoulder pole, couldn't lift a hand, would starve to death within 3 days, and insisting I would be punished by the authorities at the end of the month for failing to deliver grain. In an instant, I used the system to pull out warehouses full of fine rice and white flour, distributed free relief to everyone, slapped all the mockers in the face, and instantly overturned the whole village's perception. The intense hunger was the first memory after I regained consciousness. That kind of hunger wasn't the emptiness of dieting in modern society, nor the mild hunger of missing one meal. It was an extreme deprivation that felt like my marrow had been scooped out and my internal organs were burning wildly. It was as if my body had been drained of all nourishment, leaving only a shriveled shell barely clinging to life in endless desolation. I snapped my eyes open and the bone-chilling cold wind immediately blew through my tattered coarse linen clothes, freezing me stiff and making me tremble uncontrollably. There were no city traffic lights or familiar rented rooms in sight, only a sky full of withered yellow grass, cracked parched yellow earth, and a few dilapidated, crumbling adobe houses in the distance. My name is Kane. Before crossing over, I was a thoroughly unemployed young man in America. I had just gotten past the anxiety of being jobless when an out-of-control truck rear-ended me. Everything went black, and I was completely severed from my former world. I thought I was surely dead, but when I opened my eyes again I had somehow transmigrated into this strange ancient world, occupying the body of a youth named Li Ming. The original owner was a lonely poor country boy. It was a year of war and famine. The harvest failed. His parents starved to death, leaving only him to guard the ruined house. He went hungry for 7 days straight, and finally couldn't hold on and died, which allowed me to take over. Fragments of the original owner's memories flooded my mind, each filled with suffering, years of war, heavy taxes from the authorities, fields lying fallow with nothing growing, corpses scattered across the surrounding villages. Only a few people had survived. In this year when human life was worth less than grass, staying alive was the greatest luxury. I propped up my weak body and struggled to climb up from the cold earthen bed. My legs were numb, my whole body feeble. With the slightest movement the burning in my stomach intensified. According to the original owner's memory, today was a big day in the village, the day of life or death decision for all the single poor men. The court was defeated, and a large number of guilty officials and great families were confiscated and exiled. The women of those households were all downgraded to criminal status and sent out to the villages to be claimed and adopted by the village's single men. But there is never a free lunch under heaven. The authorities set a harsh rule: anyone who claimed a woman had to deliver 100 gin of grain to the government each month. Failure to do so on time would result in corporal punishment at best, and at worst both the man and the woman would be deported to the border to serve as conscripts. 100 gin of grain might not have meant much in years of plenty, but in this crop-failed year when people were gnawing tree bark to fill their stomachs, it was a crushing burden that could break an ordinary household, never mind paying it monthly. Ordinary folk might not be able to scrape together 100 gin of grain in an entire year. I dragged my tottering body out through the ruined courtyard gate. The open space at the village entrance was already packed with people. The cold wind howled, and everyone was sallow, gaunt, and ragged, faces showing numbness and despair. In the center of the crowd, a dozen or so women in plain, tasteful cloth garments stood with bowed heads. They were slender and upright, their manners gentle and refined, their features carrying an unmistakable scholarly air completely out of step with the coarse, dull peasants around them. At a glance they were clearly noble daughters who had lived in ease. These were the wives and daughters of the punished officials who had been exiled, once dressed in silk and fed sumptuous food. Their fingers never touching the hardships of daily life now fallen to this state, their eyes full of terror and helplessness. The official attendant in charge of registrations, Zhao Qing, wore a stern expression, holding a thick household register. He stood on the millstone and shouted loudly. Rules reiterated once more. One person may claim one girl. Pay a monthly grain levy of 100 gin. Register monthly. Those who fail to supply grain will be severely punished without mercy. Those willing to claim step forward to register. Latecomers will be disqualified outright. When his words fell, the villagers watching whispered among themselves. No one dared step forward. Everyone knew well in their hearts that these pampered noble young ladies could neither farm nor spin and weave. They were of no help to a household, pure burdens who only consumed. Worse still was the monthly 100 gin grain tax. Ordinary families simply could not bear it. To claim someone would be courting death. These delicate ladies look nice but are useless. Taking them home means not only no help but also feeding them for nothing while paying grain every month, the sure way to die. I'd rather be a bachelor for life than touch these nobles. I'd probably be dead before the month's out. All around me were murmurs of retreat and hesitation, when at that moment a brash, hoarse voice suddenly rang out. Heh, as far as I'm concerned, it's just as well no one claims them, saves wasting grain. I turned to look and saw Wang Hu, the village bully, striding over, broad-shouldered with a face full of coarse features. He was one of the village's tyrants, strong and powerfully built, hoarding leftover grain from previous years, so he fared relatively well during the famine. He bullied the weak and swaggered through the hamlet, In the original owner's lifetime, he had often been the one to torment and exploit him, one who swept his gaze over the group of delicate noblewomen with contempt, deliberately raising his voice to taunt. All of you are soft-skinned and tender. Weak as saplings, a gust of wind would knock you down. Don't talk about working the fields. You'd probably struggle even carrying half a bucket of water. Anyone stupid enough to claim them is just asking for trouble, can't deliver the grain by month's end. Wait to be taken to jail by the authorities. Everyone echoed in agreement, and none dared to step forward to claim it. Just as everyone recoiled and the situation stalled, a cold mechanical prompt abruptly thundered in my mind. Detected. Host is in a desolate year of crisis. Binding conditions satisfied. Goddess Cashback System officially activated. System function. Bind to a fallen noblewoman. By gaining the target's favor, you can trigger grain cashback, material exchanges, and benefit bonuses. The higher the favor, the richer the cashback rewards. Unlockable rewards include infinite grain storage space, rare materials, and exclusive privileges. Newbie tip. Initially bind multiple noblewomen. Their cashback multipliers stack. Make a comeback from utter despair and amass endless wealth. My pupils contracted sharply. My heart pounded wildly, and an intense surge of ecstasy instantly dispelled the weakness throughout my body. The transmigrator's golden cheat finally arrived, and it was a godlike system tailored to my current desperate situation. I immediately looked up at the women in the arena. As my gaze swept over them, a line of pale blue translucent text hovered above each of their heads, clearly indicating their initial favorability values. Most of the women had an initial favorability of 0, only aloofness and guardedness. My eyes quickly scanned and finally settled on the 3 women whose temperament and look stood out the most. First, graceful in posture with delicate brows and eyes, she is Su Qingyuan, the legitimate daughter of a prestigious family, starting with a favorability of 5 points. Second, dazzling and bold in temperament, she is Chu Wanyao, the official's eldest daughter, starting with a favorability of 3 points. Third, gentle-eyed, patient and reserved, she is Wenjiyu, a young lady of a respected clan, starting with a favorability of 8 points. And she also has the highest initial favorability in the whole room. All 3 are the epitome of refined ladies, exquisitely beautiful and with an otherworldly bearing, even if they wear plain clothes and show signs of weariness. Their elegance cannot be concealed, when everyone else regards them as delicate and useless. I am utterly certain they are my one miraculous trump card to turn the tables in this desperate, barren year. The burdens that no one would dare to take are precisely the top-tier bound targets recognized by the system. Noble status, cultured background, their maximum affection caps far surpass ordinary women, and the cashback rewards will inevitably be even richer. Without a moment's hesitation, facing the astonished gazes around me, I stepped forward and loudly called out to Zhao Qing at the stone mill. Officer, I claim 3 people, Su Qingyuan, Chu Wanyao, Wenjiyu. As soon as the words fell, the whole hall went instantly silent. Everyone's eyes turned in unison to my thin, emaciated frame, written all over them disbelief. A penniless orphan with dead parents, a house with nothing in it, who was himself nearly starving. How could he possibly claim, in one breath, 3 of the most delicate, least able to work noble young ladies? After a brief silence, the whole hall erupted into uproarious laughter. Wang Hu laughed even harder, bending backwards and striding up to me, his face full of mockery as he sized me up and down. Li Ming, you must be starved, silly. Right. You can barely drag yourself along. What are you going to use to support them? How will you pay 300 jin of grain every month? I think you must want to die sooner. The villagers around also snorted and jeered, their chatter rising and falling. Truly overestimating yourself. Taking 3 on by yourself is just asking to die. This kid must be starved stupid. In a famine it's hard enough to stay alive, yet he dares to take on such a massive trouble. Listening to the skyful of mockery and scorn at my ears, my expression remained calm, my heart completely unmoved. Even faintly expectant, the more arrogantly they laugh now, the more embarrassed they'll be later. These narrow-minded villagers will never know that the burden they shun will become my greatest opportunity to dominate the famine years, amass endless grain, and grow fabulously rich in the region. Zhao Qing also looked stunned, frowning at me. Li Ming, are you sure you've thought this through? Claiming 3 people requires submitting 300 jin of grain every month. No exceptions. Strictly punished if late. No leniency. I looked up and met his gaze, my tone firm and every word resounding. I've made up my mind, register me immediately. Su Qingyuan, Chu Wanyao, and Wenjiyu were also stunned, never having expected that the 3 of them, ignored by everyone else, would all be claimed in one breath by a frail, impoverished young man. Beyond their shock, each of them harbored complex emotions in their eyes. Surprise, unease, and a faint spark of hope. I stared at the 3 incomparable beauties before me, feeling the system quietly standing by in my mind, and a faint, calm smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. So what if it's a barren, desperate year? So what if people mock me? From the moment I bound these 3 goddesses, my path to a comeback officially begins. Endless grain, Towering wealth all are in my hands. Zhao Qing held the household register, his brows tightly furrowed, disbelief written all over his face. He had served in the township for many years. He had seen countless poor people beg humbly to survive. But he had never seen anyone willingly take on such a huge burden during a famine. Li Ming, I'll ask you one last time. Are you sure you want to claim Su Qingyuan, Chu Wanyao, and Wenjiu? Zhao Qing raised his hand and pointed at me, his tone carrying a clear warning. One person pays 100 jin of grain per month. 3 people is 300 jin a month. The fields are barren and there's no harvest. No household in the village can reliably produce that amount of grain. If you fail to pay on time and grain is lacking, under imperial law not only will you be flogged and exiled, but these 3 women will also be punished together. Can you bear those consequences? The surrounding noise and laughter gradually died down. Everyone stared at me, waiting to see me back down and renege. In their eyes, my earlier stubbornness had been the madness of a starving person. Once I calmed down I would surely shrink back. Wang Hu stood aside with his arms folded, a mocking sneer on his face, looking down at my thin frame and jeering in a taunting voice. Officer, don't waste your breath trying to persuade him. This kid's gone mad from hunger. His mind's not clear if he's bent on courting death. No one can stop him. Just register them. If he can't produce the grain at month's end, the authorities can take him away and spare the village the disgrace. The moment those words came out, the gathered villagers erupted again, their mocking remarks crashing over him in waves. Exactly's filthy poor and still has the nerve to act big and claim 3 noble girls. He's just asking for trouble. 300 jin of grain. Don't talk about a month, give him 3 years and he still couldn't scrape that together. Just wait and see him whipped and exiled by the authorities. Those 3 delicate girls are so unlucky. Good family maidens fallen on hard times. And of all people they're claimed by a pauper sooner or later they'll starve and suffer with him. Rumors and gossip were like a bone-chilling wind, wrapping around the 3 frail women. Su Qingyuan's body trembled slightly. The delicate brows and eyes were filled with helplessness and desolation. She was born into a scholarly family and had read widely since childhood. She had never imagined that after misfortune she would become an object of ridicule, nor that her future would be empty rooms and an inability to protect herself. Chu Wanao was proud and fierce by nature. Now she bit her lip hard, humiliation and unwillingness churning in her eyes. She instinctively straightened her back, her gaze distant and cold, clearly prepared to endure suffering and contempt in the days to come. To her, today's claiming was not a homecoming but a plunge into a deeper hell. Only Wenjiu was slightly calm. She lowered her eyelids and quietly observed my frail yet upright figure. A faint, hard-to-detect curiosity hidden in her eyes. She could not see any confidence in me, yet somehow felt that the resolve in my eyes was not feigned. Confronted with the crowd's mockery, doubt, and disdain, I felt nothing. These villagers trapped in barren years had their vision locked by hunger and suffering. They could only see the present barrenness and despair, and could not understand the system opportunity one held. The death-bringing shackles in their eyes were precisely the only shortcut for me to turn fate on its head. I lifted my eyes to look Zhao Qing straight in the face, my voice calm and resolute, without the slightest wavering. Sir, my mind is made up. Register me immediately. I will bear all the consequences myself. Seeing my firm attitude, Zhao Qing stopped persuading me. He shook his head, put pen to paper, and quickly transferred the 3 people's household registrations under my name. From the moment the pen left the paper, I officially became the husband of the 3, and at the same time took on the heavy tax of 300 jin of grain per month. After finishing the registration, Zhao Qing put the booklet away and coldly warned, "Pay the grain on time. Do not break the law." Then turned and left with the accompanying officers. Once the officials were gone, Wang Hu immediately became even more arrogant. He stepped forward and stood directly in front of me, his hulking frame radiating a powerful sense of oppression, completely blocking my way. He looked down at me with contempt, his hoarse voice carrying undisguised malice. "Li Ming, you really have guts. The 3 young ladies no one in the village dared touch off all people. You, a poor pauper, took them in. I want to see how you plan to support these 3 beauties in your empty, worthless shack. How you'll pay the monthly 300 jin of grain." I lifted my eyes slightly and met his gaze calmly. "My affairs are none of your business. None of my business." Wang Hu laughed as if he'd heard the funniest thing in the world, tilting his head back and laughing loudly, his eyes growing even more vicious. "You stir up such a scandal in the village and still dare say it's none of my business. I'm kindly warning you. These 3 women can't carry a shoulder pole or lift a hand. They don't know how to do any farm work, pure dead weight eating free food. In less than 10 days, the 4 of you will starve to death in that broken house." He pointed at the 3 women, his words viciously cutting, deliberately meant to demean and humiliate. "Look at how delicate and soft-skinned they are. They couldn't even gnaw on tree bark. In a lean year they won't survive half a month. Li Ming, I advise you to cut your losses now and hand them over willingly. You might even get a little coarse grain to survive a few days. Don't end up losing both people and money and waste your life for nothing." Those words were vicious to the extreme, each sentence prodding at the 3 of them as sore spots. Su Qingyuan's fingertips went slightly white, her eyes full of bitterness. Chu Wanyao's face turned instantly ashen, a sense of humiliation welling up completely. Even the mild-mannered Wen Jiu couldn't help clenching her sleeve, a look of grievance appearing in her eyes. My expression darkened at once, and the aura around me grew colder. I can tolerate others mocking or belittling me, but I will never allow anyone to humiliate or trample on my people in public. I stepped forward half a pace to face the burly Wang Hu, my voice cold and strong, each word clear. They are the people I claim. From now on, I will protect them, whether they live or die. Whether they pay taxes is my business. No outsider has the right to interfere. Instead of wasting breath on mocking me, you do better to mind your own affairs. My stance was forceful, nothing like the weak, easily bullied Li Ming of old. Wang Hu was clearly taken aback for a moment. He hadn't expected that the pushover he'd always toyed with would dare to defy him in public. After a brief moment of stupefaction, Wang Hu's face darkened completely, his gaze vicious. He raised his hand to shove me. A few days without seeing you and you've gotten bold. How dare you talk back to me? I think you must not want to live anymore. I had anticipated this and deftly stepped aside to avoid his palm. Now that I've merged with the mind of a modern adult, my temperament is steady and my thinking clear. I'm not afraid of this village bully who only knows how to rely on brute force. I stared at him coldly. Wang Hu, the household registration with the authorities has been sorted. The law is supreme. Aren't you afraid of being held accountable by the officials if you publicly pick quarrels and oppress the good people? That remark hit Wang Hu's soft spot precisely. He usually runs roughshod over the village and bullies the weak. But what he fears most is the law and the authorities. Once it gets to the officials, he's the one who will suffer. Wang Hu froze mid-motion, retracting his hand with hatred, glaring at me through clenched teeth with a tone full of venomous threat. Fine, very fine. You've got guts. I'll not trade words with you for the moment. We'll wait and see at the end of the month. I want to see how you produce 300 gene of grain. If you can't get it, not only will you be exiled, but those three beauties like flowers will also suffer because of you. I bet you. Within a month you'll be crying and regretting today's decision. Having said that, Wang Hu whipped his sleeve and swaggered off with his gaggle of followers. Before leaving he didn't forget to look back at us with a contemptuous glance. As if already certain I was doomed to die, the villagers watching gradually dispersed, walking away while gossiping. Not a single person believed I'd have a good outcome. Everyone was waiting to see me crash at the end of the month. Ruined, disgraced, and severely punished by the authorities. The noisy village entrance soon grew quiet, leaving only me and three slender women standing in the cold wind. The cold wind howled past, stirring the yellow earth, and our four figures looked especially lonely in the empty village entrance. The three beauties wore different expressions, each hiding unease and anxiety in their eyes, clearly shaken by the earlier ridicule and threats. I turned to look at them, withdrew the chill from my demeanor, and spoke calmly and steadily, without any flourish. You need not be afraid. From now on, with me here, I will not let you go hungry or freeze, nor will I allow anyone to bully you, if others do not trust me. It's all right. By the end of the month I will prove everything. Su Qingyuan raised her eyes to me. A trace of puzzlement and uncertainty showed in her refined gaze as she said softly, Young master, 300 dan of grain is really too much in this famine year. We don't want to be a burden to you. Chu Wanao still wore her pride, but could not hide the despair in her heart. She said softly, We are already sinners whose fates are out of our hands, and we have caused you to suffer. Which is truly wrong. If we really can't gather enough grain, you need not force yourself, young master. Only Wen Jiu spoke gently, his voice soft and delicate. I trust that the young master knows his own limits. Listening to the three people's completely different words, I understood in my heart. Their personalities and states of mind were now clear. I did not offer much explanation. Excessive words were meaningless. Only solid grain and a future reversal could completely dispel their worries and soothe their unease. I raised my hand to signal them to follow, my tone calm. Let's go home first. I'll solve this huge problem. I turned and walked toward the dilapidated adobe house, three slender figures silently trailing behind me. Everyone was waiting to see me fall into the abyss and bring about my own ruin. But only I knew that the overturning of the whole village's perception, the comeback, was only just beginning. Wang Hu's taunts, the villagers' contempt, the government's grain taxes and pressure would all eventually become the stepping stones for my rise to wealth and honor. My shabby house sat in the most remote corner of the village. It was the most ruined adobe dwelling in the whole place. The earthen walls were mottled and cracked, the thatch on the roof sparse and tattered, unable to block the cold wind or shelter against the rain. The courtyard was bare. Not a single wild vegetable or scrap of weed could be seen. In this famine year, when everyone was scraping to survive and tearing bark and roots to eat, this little yard had long since been completely desolate. Leading three exceptionally graceful beauties into the courtyard brought a burst of life to the bleak, ruined little house, though it only made the setting feel more incongruous. They had walked in silence, their faces growing paler, and their steps more unsteady. They had already been traveling for days, enduring hunger and thirst. having just been jeered and humiliated at the village entrance. They were exhausted in body and spirit. Pushed to their limits, I looked back. Su Qingyuan's figure was slight and frail. She lifted a hand to smooth her tattered lapel, eyes hiding in exhaustion and bewilderment that couldn't be concealed. Once the legitimate daughter of a prominent household who lived in grand courtyards and wore brocade and jade, when had she ever lived in such a dilapidated, shabby place? Chu Wanao still pressed her lips together, her face defiant and stubborn, refusing to show an ounce of weakness. Yet her slightly trembling shoulders had already betrayed the unease and panic inside her. Proud as she was, she had now completely fallen into the dust, without even the right to choose her fate. Only Wen Jiyu remained the calmest. She didn't look around or show any disdain. She simply stood quietly in the yard, her gaze fixed on the cracked ground, her expression indifferent as she silently adapted to this sudden life of decline. Watching the three of them with such different expressions, I understood clearly that to get them to drop their guards completely and accept me sincerely, empty promises were useless. In chaotic times and years of hardship, only having enough to eat and a stable life is real assurance and the fastest way to increase goodwill and trigger the system's payoff. I pushed open the squeaky, dilapidated wooden door first. Dust hit me in the face. The furnishings were stripped to the extreme, just a tattered Kong bed, a legless wooden table, and 2 crooked wooden chairs. The place was empty and bare. After the original owner starved to death, this little house had completely fallen into ruin. Don't speak of stored grain. You couldn't even find a single drop of clean water. Sit down and rest for a moment. Don't be formal. I stepped aside to indicate the three should take seats, my tone gentle and steady, free of the coarse vulgarity of commoners and without any deliberate flattery, only the plainest reassurance. You've had a long journey. Rest first. I'll see about finding something to eat. At these words, a flicker of complex emotion passed through each of their eyes. They were already so hungry they felt faint, their stomachs empty as could be. Yet looking around this ruined little house, where was there any trace of food to be found? Su Qingyuan shook her head slightly, her voice weak and gentle. Young master, you needn't trouble yourself. In these famine years, hunger is everywhere. Even tree bark and roots have been dug up where is there food to be found. We can manage. We don't want to add to your burden. Chu Wanao looked up at me, her tone carrying a faint, barely noticeable resignation. The whole village can't even get enough to eat, and your room has nothing at all. Why force yourself? We've already accepted our fate. Going hungry is normal. Only Wen Jiyu, looking at my determined gaze, softly echoed, we'll follow the master's arrangements. I didn't offer much explanation, only a faint smile. They couldn't see hope because they lacked the system's blessing. For ordinary people, a famine year with no grain is despair. But for me, as long as I earn goodwill, it becomes endless vitality. I turned and walked out of the room into the yard. In the original owner's memories, a corner of the room still held some dry firewood. I tidied and gathered it, then found a relatively flat shard of stone and cleaned it simply. After finishing these trivial tasks, I returned to the room and spoke to the 3 exhausted women. You 3 were born into distinguished families, pampered since childhood, never having endured the hardships of famine, nor ever suffering such humiliation. Your misfortune today is not your fault. I spoke sincerely, each word earnest. From this day on, since I am your husband, I will protect you. If others mock, belittle, or cast cold glances, I will bear it for you. You need not take it to heart. Life will only get better. It will not remain this harsh forever. These words lacked flowery rhetoric, yet they were especially sincere and struck straight to the heart. Su Qingyuan was slightly stunned. A faint mist of tears instantly gathered in her clear, elegant eyes. Since falling into misfortune, everyone had treated them as disgraced officials' burdens, useless baggage. Only this poor young man before them was willing to truly comfort and accept their downfall, to safeguard their remaining dignity. Detection. Host sincerely consoles fallen noblewomen, protects their dignity. Su Qingyuan's favorability increases by 10 points. Current favorability is 15 points. The cold system prompt sounded in my mind on cue. I brightened. The first affection increase successfully triggered. I struck while the iron was hot, continuing in a soft voice to soothe. You need not feel inferior, nor should you be afraid. A temporary fall from grace is nothing. Life's ups and downs are normal. I believe in your integrity and character. You will weather this crisis. A faint light flickered in Wen Jiyu's eyes, and the previously meek gaze gained a touch of warmth. She is perceptive and sensitive to people's natures. My sincere treatment allowed her to fully let down the last of her defenses. Wen Jiyu sensed the host's goodwill. Affection increased by 7 points. Current affection 15 points. 2 consecutive system prompts sounded, and the favorability of the 2 heroines rose in sync, instantly opening up the situation at the start. Only the proud and hot-tempered Chu Wanao still harbored resentment. Her favorability remained unchanged, clearly not having fully let go of the humiliation and prejudice in her heart. I wasn't anxious. People's hearts need to be warmed slowly. Gradual progress makes the most sense. What mattered most right now was fulfilling the promise, producing actual food to completely dispel everyone's perception of a hopeless situation. I silently spoke to the system in my mind. Use favorability to exchange for basic survival rations. Detected that the host has 30 effective favorability points, triggering the first cashback exchange. Congratulations to the host on a successful redemption. You have received 5 gene of fine white flour, 5 gene of high-quality rice, and 4 barrels of clean water. The supplies have been stored in your exclusive space and can be taken out at any time. As the system prompt ended, my personal storage space opened in an instant, and 10 kinds of heavy grains and clean water were quietly displayed inside. There were no world-shaking phenomena. Only the most practical, life-saving supplies, perfectly solving the immediate food and warmth crisis for the 4 of us. I kept my expression calm, while the other 3 bowed their heads to rest and let down their guard. I moved my mind and quietly took out an appropriate amount of flour and rice from the space, and then a barrel of clean drinking water, placing it steadily at the corner of the table. After doing all this, I spoke softly. All right. Get up and eat something first to fill your stomach. The 3 looked up at the sound, and when they saw the snow-white rice and flour and the clear, fresh water on the table, all 3 pairs of eyes suddenly widened in disbelief. Su Qingyuan sprang to her feet, staring blankly at the food on the table, her voice trembling with incredulity. Refined rice and white flour. This is the finest grain in these years of famine, young master. Where did you get it? Chu Wanyao's previously indifferent gaze instantly brightened. She stared fixedly at the white rice and flour, the stubbornness and coldness on her face completely melting away, replaced by utter shock. In these famine years when even tree bark and roots are hard to come by, ordinary people can only eat barely edible mud cakes and chaff. Such fine, clean refined rice and flour had not been seen by them for months. When Jiu's pupils also trembled slightly, the warmth in his eyes was filled with astonishment, and his look toward me held a stronger mix of curiosity and trust. I gave a calm look and brushed it off lightly. I've got my ways. Just eat in peace. I didn't explain the source in detail. A sense of mystery happens to be the best card right now. Too many words would seem contrived, only real, tangible food could completely upend their assumptions and cement my image in their minds. Watching the pure white, plump rice and flour before them and sensing the faint aroma of grain in the air, the 3 fallen noblewomen finally relaxed after days of tension. Hunger swept through them. But it also made them truly realize they no longer had to gnaw on bark or go hungry, no longer had to cling to life in desperate circumstances. Seeing the 3 of them ease up, I understood. The initial goodwill exchange had landed smoothly. The crisis of subsistence was fully resolved, and my comeback during these barren years had taken its firm first step. And this was only the beginning. Staring at the substantial, polished rice and refined flour on the table, the 3 beauties could not shake the shock in their eyes. The years of famine had raged for so long that not a single grain of fine grain could be seen in the village. Every household survived on bitter, hard-to-swallow tree bark, sun-dried roots, and even bran mixed with dirt. Such plump, snow-white rice and white flour were worth a fortune in the present village. I did not explain the origin of the food. I only gestured for them to light a fire and cook. The dry twigs and grass I had gathered in the yard just now proved useful. I skillfully kindled the fire. The dilapidated earthen stove slowly warmed, and the cold little room finally gained a hint of domestic warmth. Su Qingyuan and Wen Jiu stepped forward to help sort the ingredients. Chu Wanyao, though still carrying a trace of pride, quietly rose to lend a hand. The 3 had learned housekeeping from childhood, and even amid hardship they moved with composed, meticulous grace, the bearing of gentry girls that ordinary village women could not match. Water went into the pot, the rice grains rolled and steamed, and a faint rice fragrance quickly drifted out through the broken window frames. At first it was a light, delicate scent. As the fire grew, the rich, mellow aroma of the grains spread freely, drifting out with the breeze and dispersing throughout the village. In this famine year when everyone was numb with hunger, the scent of grain had an irresistible allure. It wasn't the light fragrance of wild grasses and foliage. It was the tangible, stomach-filling smell of cooked food, instantly piercing the long-standing silence and bitterness that had shrouded the whole village. Soon, faint footsteps came from outside. Several villagers living nearby were the first to be drawn by the aroma, craning their necks and gathering around the outer wall of my courtyard. What is that smell? So fragrant. It's the smell of cooked grain, a gaunt middle-aged villager said, clutching the earthen wall and staring into the courtyard in disbelief. No way. The whole village is almost starving. Who could be cooking fine grain? You must be mistaken. It's probably the smell of boiled roots, a younger villager next to him said, face full of doubt, reflexively arguing. Before the last of the words fell, an even richer scent of rice floated out again, unmistakably clear. Everyone instantly fell silent, astonishment written in their eyes. They all stood on tiptoe and craned their necks, their gazes fixed on my ramshackle mud brick house, the most dilapidated in the whole village. It's really fine grain. I've lived long enough to know this smell. I can't be mistaken. This fragrance only comes from polished rice and white flour. The news spread very fast. In a short while more and more villagers came at the sound. The low courtyard walls were surrounded by people, a dark, pressing mass, each face full of doubt as murmurs rose and fell. It's Li Ming's place. That poor kid who just claimed 3 noble daughters. How is that possible? His parents starved to death long ago. The house is empty. Not even bark to chew on. How could there be fine grain to cook with? The crowd was full of doubt and incomprehension. Everyone's understanding was completely overturned by the scene before them. In their eyes, I was the poorest in the village, the least likely to survive, the fool everyone mocked, destined to fail by the end of the month. But now the aroma of cooked grain wafting from my home was the most luxurious scent the village had smelled in months. Soon, Wang Hu, who had rushed over at the news, pushed through the crowd and strode to the yard wall, his face full of rage and disbelief. That morning he had publicly mocked me for courting death, certain that my 3 delicate ladies and I would starve within 10 days. Then he turned and smelled the rich scent of cooked grain from my home, and shock and humiliation surged up in him. He stared fixedly at the shut door and shouted in a rough voice, "Li Ming, come out here." The warm scent of rice continued to drift through the room. The steaming porridge and rice were already cooked. The snow-white rice porridge was thick and glutinous, the white flour cakes pan-fried to a light golden crisp, placed on the 3-legged missing wooden table, looking especially tempting. The 3 beauties stared at the steaming dishes, the confusion and fear in their eyes completely dissipating, replaced by a genuine calm. I motioned for the 3 to eat in peace, rose and walked to the door, and slowly pushed the wooden door open. The yard beyond was packed with villagers watching the commotion. Wang Hu stood at the front, his face dark and fierce, his eyes full of suspicion and unwillingness. "Where did your family get this grain?" Wang Hu stared at me intently, his tone vicious. "The whole village had no harvest. Every household is hungry. And you, a pauper, how can you be cooking polished rice and white flour? Did you steal the village stores, or hide some ill-gotten wealth?" His words instantly alerted the onlooking villagers. They began to echo and the doubts came crashing in from all sides. "That's right. It must have been stolen. Otherwise there's no way he could have fine grain." I knew something was off when he suddenly got bold. Turns out he was hiding stolen grain. Listening to everyone's baseless speculations and slurs, I remained calm, not the least bit flustered. In years of scarcity people's hearts grow narrow and greedy. They can't bear to see others fare well. The moment someone escapes utter desperation, they inevitably attract unfounded suspicion. That's human nature. I spoke lightly, my voice carrying clearly across the room. "The grain came by legitimate means, clean and above board, and it's none of your business. It's my family's grain for our own consumption. I don't owe anyone in accounting." "Nonsense," Wang Hu barked, his face fierce. "You, an orphan with nothing. How could you possibly have legitimate grain in these lean years? I think you're up to no good. Hand over the grain now to share with the village, or I'll report you to the authorities for hoarding stolen goods of unknown origin." He was clearly trying to bully me, using the crowd's suspicion to force me to hand over the grain, intending to seize my chance for nothing. The onlookers chimed in, their eyes full of greed. Everyone wanted a piece. I swept the crowd with a cold gaze, my presence steady, each word ringing out. "First, the grain was earned by my own effort, its origin legitimate, and I have no shame before heaven and law. Second, I have never accepted so much as a grain of aid from the village. I now support myself. Why would I give it away? Third, if anyone fabricates rumors or provokes trouble without cause, I do not mind going with them to the authorities to confront them and see who is truly at fault and breaking the law." My firm stance instantly silenced the crowd. No one expected that the once timid and easy-to-bully Li Ming would now not only have grain to live on but also such a powerful prize. And see, every sentence righteous and irrefutable. Wang Hu's face flushed from green to white. I had silenced him with my retort. And though he was full of resentment, he didn't dare act up anymore. What he feared most was an official inquiry. If it escalated, he would be the one accused of making trouble, and he would be in the wrong. The gathered villagers also fell silent. The greed in their eyes faded, leaving only deep shock and confusion. They still couldn't understand how a poor boy on the verge of starvation suddenly possessed the fine grain others had long dreamed of. I ignored everyone's gazes, turned and closed the wooden door, shutting out all prying and gossip. Outside, whispers and unrest continued, but inside the house it was warm and calm, the air filled with the scent of rice. Looking at the 3 women sitting quietly at the table, I understood clearly, this was only the first step of my comeback. A brief period of food and warmth was already enough to overturn the whole village's perceptions. From now on the resources at my disposal would only grow. Today's suspicion and doubt would become tomorrow's envious admiration. In this famine's desperation I had long since leapt out of the empire, while these villagers trapped by worldly prejudice would continue to struggle in suffering. The moment the wooden door was closed tight, the noisy arguments outside were completely shut out. Warmth filled the room, the fragrance of grain everywhere. Compared to the cold, desolate world beyond the door, this place felt like the only small haven in a chaotic age. The 3 young women looked up as I returned, and their expressions quietly changed. Where there had been hesitation, unease, and pity before, there was now genuine trust. Steaming rice porridge with crispy pancakes was the most secure, the most dignified meal they had eaten since their misfortune. They relaxed, no longer reserved, and sat quietly to eat. The gloom around their brows swept away, watching their slightly eased faces. I knew well that this bit of food and warmth was only a drop in the bucket. The greatest danger had not yet been averted. The monthly grain tax of 300 jin hung over my head like a sword. The very reason the whole village was convinced I was doomed. I had driven back Wang Hu and the villagers for now, but they would not give up. They were only waiting to see me fail to pay at the end of the month. Waiting to see my reputation ruined. The peaceful day lasted only half a day. In the afternoon the cold wind rose again, and a series of urgent, heavy footsteps shattered the courtyard's tranquility. Li Ming, open the door. Official inspection. From outside came Zhao Cheng's cold shout, carrying the unique arrogance and oppression of government agents. Accompanying the call was the heavy pounding on the wooden door, shaking the worn door slightly. A chill settled in my chest. I understood immediately trouble had come to my doorstep. No need to think twice. It had to be that the smell of fine grain wafting from the courtyard that morning and my bold confrontation with the whole village had spread. Someone had secretly tipped off the authorities, or Wang Hu, unwilling to be humiliated, had deliberately brought the officials to crush me. Trying to force my submission through the law, I raised my hand to signal the three young women to stay inside, then stood and opened the door. The wooden door swung wide, and Zhao Cheng stood at the threshold with two constables holding cudgels, his expression cold, eyes sharp as knives, staring straight at the scene inside. The rich scent of rice lingering in the air could not be concealed at all. Zhao Cheng's nostrils twitched. A flash of strong surprise crossed his eyes, quickly turning into a scornful scrutiny. No wonder you're so bold today, turns out you were hiding private grain, Zhao Cheng sneered, stepping directly into the room. His gaze swept quickly across the traces of food on the table, growing more suspicious. The whole village had a failed harvest this year. Every household is starving. You, a poor orphan with no support, actually eating fine rice and white flour. The accusatory tone in his words left no doubt. He didn't believe my claim of a legitimate source. From ancient times to now, when poor commoners suddenly possess refined grain during years of famine, to officials it must be either theft, robbery, or concealed assets, all grounds for suspicion. I kept my expression calm. Neither servile nor arrogant, officer. In troubled times everyone finds their own way to survive. The grain I have was obtained by my own means, through legitimate channels, with nothing illegal about it. Obtained by your own means. Zhao Cheng laughed as if hearing the funniest thing in the world, turning to the two constables beside him with a sneer. In a famine that has left not a single grain within 100-mile radius, and driven the grain merchants away, you, an orphan from the countryside with nothing, managed to come up with polished rice and fine flour. Who are you trying to fool? Me. He pressed forward step by step, his tone growing more severe. I'm advising you to confess truthfully. Where did the grain come from? Did you rob travelers, steal from neighbors, or hide some trader's ill-gotten goods? If that's proven, the punishment will be even worse. The three of them in the room went pale at once. They rose instinctively, eyes full of anxiety. They were well aware of how harsh the law was. If they were accused of hiding stolen goods, not only would I face great disaster, but as the daughters and widows of traders, their deaths would be far more terrible. I stepped aside to stand before the three of them, meeting Zhao Cheng's oppressive gaze steadily, my tone calm throughout. Sir, without evidence one cannot convict at will. I only just reclaimed my household today, living honestly, law-abiding, never having raided or stolen. If you suspect me, by all means thoroughly investigate the whole village. I have never taken so much as a trifle from another. I paused briefly, then shifted my words to strike at the heart of the matter. Furthermore, the law only sets rules for tax collection. It never dictates what people may eat. I have my own means of storing grain. I do not steal or plunder, nor break the law. What crime is there? Zhao Cheng was silenced by my words, his expression instantly darkening. He had been instigated to pick a quarrel and meant to use the pretext of grain sources to pressure me and squeeze a little profit. But he hadn't counted on my quick tongue and sound arguments. There was not a scrap of evidence to latch onto. Unable to fabricate a charge, he immediately changed tack, his eyes coldly fixed on me. Fine. If I won't investigate where your grain comes from, then explain your grain tax. You claim 3 female dependents and must remit 300 jin of grain each month. I'll make it clear today. Anyone in the village may be granted a deferred payment, but you will not. Zhao Cheng's tone was hard, blatantly targeting me, on the last day of the month to pay taxes. If you are short by even 1 jin or late by a moment, I will immediately deal with you according to the law. 30 strokes of the cane and exile to the border. Your 3 female dependents will also be punished by being sent to the mines as slaves. This was outright deliberate persecution. When ordinary villagers had trouble delivering grain, the authorities would usually grant a few days leniency. Only I was pinned down with rigid rules and given no margin for error. Chu Wanao behind me trembled. Her usual fierceness finally gave way to real fear in her eyes. Su Qingyuan clutched her sleeve tightly, her face anxious. Only when Jiu quietly raised her eyes and looked at my tall back, still hiding a trace of trust, I couldn't help but sneer inwardly, seeing through the government's snobbery and meanness. These constables always bullied the weak and feared the strong. Seeing me down on my luck, they took advantage and tried to force me to bow and beg, to hand over the grain. But they didn't know that my greatest confidence never came from external things, but from the system. 300 gene of grain, to others a task as hard as reaching the sky. To me it was no more than a cashback reward decided in a single thought. I looked Zhao Qing straight in the eye, my tone calm yet carrying absolute certainty. Do not worry, sir, by the end of the month, 300 gene of grain will be delivered in full, not a single grain short, no grace period needed, there will be no delay. Zhao Qing, seeing my fearless demeanor, was slightly taken aback, then sneered, empty words won't help. I want to see how you, a poor boy in a dilapidated shack, will come up with 300 gene of grain. I'll inspect it myself at month's end if you can't pay. You'll be crying. After speaking, he lashed his sleeve and turned to leave with 2 constables, their footsteps striking the ground heavily. Full of menace and hostility, the house returned to silence, but now carried an invisible weight. The 3 ladies looked at me with worry filling their eyes. The government's deadline hung over everyone like a sword suspended above their heads, heavy on their minds. I turned to them, spoke slowly, my tone steady and calm. No need to worry. I told you I would protect you completely. I won't let you be implicated or suffer. 300 gene of grain, I can produce it, and I can pay it. Seeing the certainty in my gaze, the 3 ladies' panic eased a little, though they still didn't understand the source of my confidence. They began to believe, slowly, that this seemingly frail youth before them could truly uphold a haven of stability in this desperate, barren year. In my mind I had already worked it out. The government's pressure, and everyone's doubts were perfect opportunities to gain favor and unlock more system rewards. The real comeback and humiliation would come on the tax payment day at the end of the month, after Zhao Qing and the escort left. The warmth in the small courtyard seemed to be largely drained away. The government's harsh words about collective punishment and exile sat on the 3 of them like a boulder, turning an already fragile calm into a heavy, oppressive atmosphere. Su Qingyuan frowned, guilt written across her graceful features. She spoke softly, "It's all our fault for dragging you down. If it weren't for the 3 of us, you wouldn't have to bear the burden of 300 gene of grain each month, nor would the authorities single you out and put you in such a passive position, after experiencing the government's pressure just now." She saw the cruelty of reality clearly. In these harsh years when the law was strict and life was cheap, their identities as the wives and daughters of disgraced officials were the greatest liability. A single mistake could doom everyone around them to ruin. Chu Hua now clenched her sleeve, the pride gone from her eyes, leaving only a profound helplessness. Born into an official family, she knew the government's methods well. Being exiled to the mines as a slave was a torment worse than death. The thought that she might drag the young man who had sheltered them into such fate filled her with self-reproach and bitterness. Only Wenji remained calm as before, though the worry in her eyes had deepened. She watched me silently, awaiting my decision. I looked at the 3 of them, their faces heavy with guilt and self-reproach, and understood. Their previous distance, pride, and guardedness mostly stemmed from differences in background and inner insecurity. Now, sharing peril and facing danger together is the perfect opportunity to completely close the gap between us and warm their feelings. I walked slowly up to them, my tone steady and strong, each word dispelling the shadows in their hearts. You need not blame yourselves, nor feel shame. From the moment I registered and claimed you, sharing fortunes and misfortunes, weathering storms together, has been our destiny. Protecting you is not a burden, it's my true intention and my choice. I swept my gaze over the 3 and continued to reassure them. Wan Hu's mockery, the villagers' slander, the officials' persecution, I will take them all on. Let me make this clear today. While I, Li Ming, live, I will never allow you to suffer imprisonment or exile, nor will I let you drift homeless or be bullied again. No flamboyant vows. Only the most solid promise. After surviving the life and death pressure from the authorities, this promise struck straight to the heart, completely shattering the last barrier among the 3. Detected, the host safeguarded the women in a desperate situation, steadfastly bearing their fate. Su Qingyuan's feelings were moved. Favorability increased by 20 points. Current favorability 35 points. Chu Hua now set aside her pride and prejudices and acknowledged the host's responsibility. Favorability increased by 25 points. Current favorability 28 points. Wenjiu now completely trusts the host. Favorability increased by 18 points. Current favorability 33 points. 3 consecutive system prompts exploded in my mind. The 3 heroines' favorability ratings surged in unison, the increase far exceeding the effects of previous everyday consolations. True feelings reveal themselves in desperate straits. Protection in times of danger moves people far more than ordinary gentleness. A joy rose in my heart, but I did not stop there. I knew the 3 still harbored fear. Only by completely dispelling their concerns could their favorability rise again and unlock more system permissions. I raised my hand to signal the three to take seats, my tone calm and resolute. Zhao Cheng's threat seems perilous. But in fact it's nothing. 300 gene of grain is an absolute crisis for others, but for me it's merely a trivial effort. You only need to stay here in the courtyard in peace. All the turmoil and pressure from the outside world I will bear alone. Su Qingyuan looked up at me, moisture misting her eyes, and murmured, "Young master, you could clearly free yourself and live in peace. Yet you insist on bearing all the storms for us. We do not know how to repay you." "No need to repay me," I smiled faintly. "Living the rest of your days in peace is the best repayment." The gentle, sincere attitude completely dissolved the last trace of distance in Su Qingyuan's heart. She came from a prominent family, and had long been accustomed to people who flattered the powerful and put profit above all else. She had never seen anyone willing, in the face of utter despair, to shoulder an overwhelming crisis for three worthless convicted women. Su Qingyuan deeply empathizes. Favorability increases by 15 points. Current favorability 50 points. Friendly bond achieved. Achieving the friendly bond meant she had wholly let down all her guard and sincerely accepted me. On the other hand, Chu Wanyao, whose temper was once fierce, has now undergone a complete change of heart. She used to be proud and stubborn, looking down on the lower class poor, always thinking my claim was a momentary impulse and presumptuous. But after witnessing the villagers' mockery and the authorities' harassment in successive ordeals, she saw me calmly confront the bullies, stand up to official pressure, and silently protect everyone. Her prejudices were utterly shattered. She bowed her head slightly, her voice soft, tinged with guilt and sincerity. "Before I was narrow-minded and biased, and I misunderstood your intentions. From now on, I would trust you. Chu Wanya has completely let go and accepted you. Favorability increases by 22 points. Current favorability 50 points. Friendly bond achieved." Finally, there was the always gentle and delicate Wenjiu. She is perceptive and understands people's hearts and moral character best. From my confident first impression to my conduct in danger, I had already completely won her trust. Wenjiu fully trusts the host. Favorability rises by 17 points. Current favorability 50 points. Friendly bond achieved. 3 friendly bonds completed simultaneously, and a grand system announcement sounded in her mind at once. "Congratulations, host. Friendly bonds with all 3 bound targets achieved. Cumulative favorability 150 points. Large cashback reward triggered. Core privilege unlocked. Infinite storage space. Space capacity 10,000 cubic meters. Can store grain, supplies, daily necessities. Constant temperature preservation. Never deteriorates. Bond benefit triggered. Additional rewards 200 gene of refined rice. 200 gene of fine flour. 50 gene of cured meat. 1 basket of assorted dried vegetables. An unlimited supply of purified water." A flood of rewards was instantly credited. The pitch-black system space expanded completely. Tens of thousands of cubic meters of empty area unfolded quietly. Large quantities of grain and supplies were neatly displayed, and a continuous stream of fresh water flowed slowly in the corners of the space. At this moment, I was completely free of the risk of material shortages. The previous food exchanges had only provided temporary sustenance. The storage space and the large quantities of supplies unlocked now were my real trump card to survive the barren years and face any storm without fear. I suppressed the elation in my heart and kept my expression calm, looking at the 3 beauties before me with gentle eyes and full trust. I knew the situation had been utterly reversed. The villagers' mockery, Wan Hu's covetousness, and the government's pressure were all insignificant in the face of inexhaustible supplies and system privileges. I spoke softly, my tone steady and composed. "It's all right. The storm has passed. There's no need to worry anymore. Rest well. In time I will make sure that during these years of famine you live without anyone daring to bully you and without concern for food or clothing." The 3 of them bowed deeply. The terror and self-doubt in their eyes vanished completely, replaced by a profound sense of calm and hope. They finally believed that trusting the boy before them was the single correct choice in their desperate situation. And in my mind the follow-up plan had already been settled, with abundant stored grain and ample storage space. I was no longer on the defensive. Next, I would take the initiative and strike back, crushing everyone who had looked down on me. The peaceful days lasted only one night before trouble at the door returned. I knew clearly that when the officials' messengers had come yesterday to apply pressure, the whole village had seen it. And everyone still insisted I was bluffing. Especially Wang Wafter. I had contradicted him publicly, and he had seen fine grain being taken from my house. His jealousy and resentment had long since reached a breaking point. He would never stand by and watch me, a poor kid he used to manipulate, turn my life around and live peacefully during a bad harvest year. At dawn, before the sky had fully brightened, the yard was filled with chaotic footsteps and brazen shouting. A dozen rough voices burst out, shattering the village's morning silence with clear intent as they headed straight for my courtyard. "Li Ming, get out here." At the head, Wang Hu slammed his foot against the earthen wall, sending dust cascading down. His face, thick with coarse flesh, was drawn tight. His eyes were dark and violent. Behind him trailed a dozen or so idle strongmen from the village, the usual followers who hung around him, bullying the weak and cowing to the strong, each wearing a fierce look, making it clear they had come to pick a fight and forcibly cause trouble today. The three inside Su Qingyuan and the others were awakened in an instant by the noise, their faces paling slightly. After the pressure from the authorities the day before, they had thought the turmoil was over. They did not expect Wang Hu to be so brazen as to bring men and blockade their door, and the calm they had just regained tightened again. Young master, he's brought people. He's probably come to seize our grain, Su Qingyuan said softly, her tone full of worry. Chu Wanao sprang up at once, arrogance flaring again in her eyes, instinctively stepping into the front as she spoke with firm resolve. We must never let him bully us at will. The grain is the root of our survival. It must not be taken. Watching the three of them tense and on guard, I lightly raised a hand to calm them, my expression composed and unhurried. Now I possess 10,000 cubic meters of storage space. With ample grain and abundant supplies, I am no longer the penniless youth who was bullied yesterday. Wan Hu and his rabble came to provoke trouble and are simply asking for it. No matter. Just a bunch of meddlesome clowns. They can't stir up even a ripple. I stepped out of the room, pushed open the wooden door, and faced the aggressive crowd head-in. The courtyard was already packed with villagers who had gotten up early to see what was happening, each one perched on the wall or standing on tiptoe to peer in, their eyes full of spectators' anticipation. In their minds, today would surely end with Wang Hu overpowering me and seizing the grain. When Wang Hu saw me come out, he grinned, showing a mouthful of yellow teeth, his face full of sneering arrogance. Li Ming, you sure are comfortable, hiding inside enjoying the best food and drink, keeping the whole village in the dark. Tell me, where did the fine grain come from yesterday? Are you hiding something you shouldn't be? Before I could speak, he waved his hand arrogantly and pronounced judgment. I think you must have come by dishonest means. Hoarding fine grain during a famine is the root of all trouble. Today I'll stand up for the whole village, confiscate your stored grain and distribute it to the villagers so they can survive. And while we're at it, we'll drive these three pampered burdens out of the village so they won't bring the whole village to ruin later. His words sounded grandiose and public-spirited, but were actually utterly selfish. He was coveting my grain, trying to use the famine as a moral pretext to seize my supplies by force, and to drive the three heroines away to cut off my last line of defense. The followers behind him echoed and clamored in agreement, aggressive and ready at any moment to burst into the yard and seize the goods. Some of the onlooking villagers were also stirred up and began to agree, their eyes full of greed. Brother Wang is right. Hoarding fine grain in a famine is too selfish. It should be taken out and shared. These three women are already tainted by sin. If they stay in the village, they'll cause trouble sooner or later. It's safer to drive them away quickly. The uproar of shouting was overwhelming, a palpable wave of oppression. If it had been the original owner yesterday, she would have been frightened into chaos by such a scene, but to me it was utterly laughable. I stared straight at Wang Hu, my voice cold and strong, cutting through the clamor. My grain was obtained honestly, not stolen, not robbed, not against the law. Why should the supplies I earned with my own hard work be handed over to others? If you intend to seize grain by force, don't hide behind the pretense of acting for the people. It's hypocritical and ugly. Exposed in public, Wang Hu's face went ashen in an instant. Humiliated and enraged, he roared, "How dare you be insolent? An impoverished orphan dares to defy me. I bet you won't learn until you're in your coffin. Brothers, go in and search. If you find any grain, take it all." The retinue responded and was about to rush into the yard, and the situation instantly became extremely tense. My gaze turned cold. Without further words, I concentrated and took out a massive supply of food from the storage space. Piles of gleaming white rice and bags of finely milled white flour were stacked, instantly covering half the yard. Bag after bag was neatly arranged, hundreds of jean in total, dazzling in the morning light. The entire yard full of provisions sent forth a rich aroma that astonished everyone. The previously arrogant retinue froze on the spot, their steps halted, faces blank. The gathered villagers were completely speechless. One by one they widened their eyes in disbelief. In this year, when every grain was worth its weight in gold and people survived by gnawing tree bark, someone actually produced mountains of fine food. Wang Hu's pupils contracted suddenly, his gaze fixed on the stacks of grain across the yard. The arrogance on his face froze completely, replaced by sheer shock and jealousy. His voice trembled slightly. "Thighs much grain. How could you possibly have so much grain?" I stepped forward slowly, looking down at his ashen face from above. My tone was calm but utterly crushing. "Whether I have grain is none of your concern. If you want to seize my grain or drive my people away, I'll make this clear today and talk about this little reserve. The grain I have can feed the entire village for years. You dare provoke me?" Each word was a direct strike to the heart. Wang Hu went rigid, his face flushing and paling in turns. His earlier swagger was gone, replaced by complete embarrassment and panic. He finally realized that the Li Ming before him was no longer the weakling he could bully. His provocation today was nothing but self-inflicted humiliation. The courtyard piled with grain completely crushed all his arrogance and covetousness. and overturned the whole village's understanding. The courtyard stacked with mountains of polished rice and white flour utterly shattered everyone's preconceived notions. Morning light fell. The snow-white grain sacks glowed with a warm sheen, and the rich aroma of grain spread freely, filling the little yard and even drifting toward the distant hamlet. In this famine year, when corpses lay strewn and roots and tree bark were treated as treasures, such an enormous amount of fine grain was no longer mere sustenance, but top-tier wealth capable of shaking the entire village's arrangement. Wang Hu froze in place, his whole body rigid, his face alternating between iron gray and deathly pale. His earlier arrogance and domineering demeanor had vanished. The pack of sycophantic followers behind him bowed their heads one by one, legs trembling slightly, no longer daring to step forward and provoke. They had originally thought I was all bluff, putting on airs with a little bit of luck and a few rations, but the mountains of grain piled before them, laid bare, ruthlessly shredded everyone's prejudice and contempt. The gathered villagers completely exploded in reaction. After the dead silence came waves of murmurs and astonished exclamations. My goodness, so much fine grain. I've never seen this much rice and flour in my life. Before I even mocked Li Ming for overreaching, it turns out we were the short-sighted ones. Who says he can't support 3 wives? With this pile of grain, not only can he easily feed 4 people, he could feed the whole village. Voices of comment rose and fell, and the earlier mockery and contempt were gone, replaced by pure shock, envy, and awe. Human nature has always been practical and opportunistic. When I had nothing, everyone could step on me, but when I hold endless supplies, everyone vies to attach themselves to me and changes their tune. In barely a moment, the villagers who had been shouting with Wang Hu, calling me selfish and demanding the grain be split, all fell quietly silent, even instinctively shrinking back, afraid I would resent their earlier kicking me while I was down. Wang Hu's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed a dry mouthful of saliva, his face wearing an unbearably embarrassed expression. He had bullied the village for years, always the one oppressing others while others fawned over him. Today, however, he was publicly humiliated by the poor kid he had once handled at will. Losing all face and feeling utterly ashamed, he stared fixedly at the grain on the ground, his eyes full of unwillingness, but he no longer dared utter a harsh word. The wealth I displayed had completely crushed all his confidence and courage. I took a few slow steps, walked past the piles of grain, cast a cool glance over the villagers gathered to watch, and finally rested my eyes on the ashen-faced Wang Hu. You still want to search my courtyard, still want to confiscate my grain, drive my people away. My tone was calm, but laden with pressure, each word striking straight at Wang Hu's heart. Wang Hu's body trembled, his lips quivering for a long time. He couldn't utter a single retort, only clenching his fists tightly as humiliation and jealousy filled his chest. I was too lazy to argue with him further. To me, he had completely lost the right to provoke just an insignificant nobody. I lifted my eyes to the gathered villagers and spoke clearly so my voice carried. Everyone was certain I couldn't produce 300 gene of grain by the end of the month. Certain I would be exiled by the authorities and bring ruin on my family. Now I place it here. My grain is enough for me to live securely, to pay my taxes in full. No one needs to worry, nor does anyone need to meddle. When my words fell, the whole place fell silent. No one dared utter a word in reply. After a brief silence, the tide completely turned. A few of the older, quick-witted villagers were the first to react, pushing their way out of the crowd and coming forward with beaming smiles, their demeanor extremely deferential. Xiao Ming, it's the village's fault for not seeing your worth before we misunderstood you earlier. Please don't take it to heart. Yeah, no one expected you to have such great ability, to have saved up so much during the lean years. You're truly accomplished at a young age. Before Wang Hu led those lies, we were all misled by him. There was absolutely no malice intended toward you. Everyone hurriedly began to apologize and flatter, lowering themselves one by one and being as obsequious as possible. Those who had just watched coldly, waiting for me to be a joke, now all wore different faces, trying only to get close to me in hopes of snatching a bit of food from me and finding a way to survive in this bad year. More and more villagers crowded forward, chattering to ingratiate themselves. In an instant the little courtyard, once despised by all as a hopeless place, became the prized spot everyone in the village vied to curry favor with. Inside, Su Qingyuan, Chu Wanyao, and Wen Jiyu stood quietly behind the door, watching the earth-shaking change outside, their eyes full of feeling. In just a few days they had witnessed me go from everyone's ridicule to a figure the whole village respected. Such an extreme reversal made their trust in me grow all the more deeply. I looked coldly at the group of sycophantic villagers before me, feeling nothing. I knew their flattery was all false. Today that I have grain, they fawn over me in every way. Tomorrow if I fall into misfortune, they will only heap more scorn. I won't be softened into giving alms by a few hollow compliments. In chaotic times and barren years, people's hearts are cheapest. Grain is the only real leverage. Giving away freely will only breed a bunch of ungrateful wolves. I lifted my hand and spoke calmly, cutting off all their flattery. I earned my own days. I gathered my own grain. From now on, Each household should tend its own matters. There's no need to cling to me, and I won't give away anything without reason. Those blunt words instantly froze the smiles on the villagers' faces, but no one dared show the slightest displeasure. They could only nod repeatedly in agreement. One who standing nearby watched everyone fawn over me and saw me holding vast stores of grain and basking in glory. Jealousy nearly consumed him, but he could only grit his teeth and endure. Not daring to act rashly, I glanced at him lightly and said nothing more. Today's public humiliation was only the beginning. When the day of tax collection comes, I'll make everyone see clearly that they and I are worlds apart. Ever since the day I stacked grain in my courtyard and intimidated the whole village, the town's atmosphere changed completely. No one dared mock me to my face anymore, and no one dared imitate Wang Hu by coming to pick a fight. When villagers ran into me on the road, they all lowered their heads to greet me and stepped aside, treating me with the utmost respect. But I knew this reverence wasn't sincere, it was fear of the grain in my hands. Privately, countless people were still waiting in the dark to see how my story would end, because everyone was fixated on one thing: I had to deliver 300 jin of grain to the authorities every month, no matter how much grain was stored in the courtyard. In their eyes it was only a fleeting show. Many villagers whispered that I had most likely emptied all my secret reserves, or even taken desperate risks to obtain the grain, merely to keep up appearances for a short while. A monthly tax of 300 jin was a deadlock before me. An insurmountable chasm no matter what, especially Wang Hu, who had been watching coldly from the sidelines and lying low these days. He no longer came to provoke me in person, but spread rumors everywhere. Convinced that I would never make it to the tax day, that my supposedly vast stores could at best last only a few days' consumption, and by the day of payment I would be ruined when the grain ran out. Time passed in the blink of an eye, and before I knew it the final deadline for the month's payment had arrived. That day, the whole village was restless. Nearly every household set aside their work of digging grass roots and peeling bark, and gathered at the village entrance to quietly wait for the government bailiffs to come and verify the grain tax. In everyone's heart was the same thought: today would surely be the day Li Ming would be exposed, confess, and be arrested and exiled by the authorities. Zhao Qing arrived at the village entrance with the bailiffs right on time, dressed in official robes and wearing a grim expression, his gaze immediately fixed in the direction of my house. As he made his way, villagers whispered to one another, each predicting my fate. The bailiffs are here now. Li Ming is finished for good. 300 jin of grain, who could produce that in a bad year? He was just putting on a brave front before. It's a pity for those three dainty ladies, they'll be exiled and punished along with her. Wang Hu stood at the front of the crowd, arms folded, wearing a sinister, self-satisfied smirk, his eyes coldly fixed on the courtyard gate. He'd already calculated that once I was taken by the authorities and the three beauties were banished, he could seize my remaining provisions and firmly establish his authority in the village. Zhao Qing scanned the noisy crowd and spoke in a deep voice. Today is the final inspection for the monthly grain tax. All households claiming female dependents must immediately bring their grain for registration. Anyone late or short on grain will be severely punished according to the law. The few households that claimed female dependents stepped forward tremblingly, most barely able to scrape together a few dozen jin of coarse miscellaneous grain. Their faces were anxious as they repeatedly fell to their knees begging for mercy and an extension. The scene utterly humiliating. This scene made everyone even more certain. In this famine year, paying grain is harder than reaching the sky. I, a lone impoverished peasant, have absolutely no way to provide the full tax. After inspecting the remaining household's meager grain, Zhao Qing's gaze suddenly sharpened. He turned toward my house and called out loudly, "Li Ming, quickly bring your grain for inspection." The whole village fell silent in an instant. Countless eyes fixed on my courtyard gate, at once mockery, amusement, pity, contempt all intertwined. Everyone sat back and waited for my humiliating appearance, expecting me to kneel and beg for mercy. The courtyard gate creaked open. I walked out calmly, followed by Su Qingyi, Wang, graceful in posture and possessing an unearthly bearing, and two others. The four of us were neatly dressed and composed, not the slightest hint of panic or fear, forming a stark contrast to the village's tense anxiety. Before anyone could react, I willed it and steadily retrieved the full amount of grain from the storage space. Bags upon bags of cleanly dried, plump polished rice were neatly arranged, stacked in layers, exactly 300 jin of grain with not a single fraction missing. The snow-white sacks stood out sharply against the withered yellow village entrance. A rich, pure scent of grain rushed over everyone, instantly overpowering the muddied smells of earth and dead grass around. Stunning the entire scene, the whole hall fell silent. One could hear a pin drop. Zhao Qing's pupils constricted. He stepped forward briskly, reached out to touch the full sacks, and carefully inspected and verified them. The sternness on his face gradually shifted into incredulous shock. In all his years of service he had never seen anyone, even in a year of famine, hand over a full quota of fine rice, each grain plump and of superior quality, far exceeding the tax standards set by the authorities. 300 jin. A full 300 jin of polished rice. Not a grain off. Zhao Qing murmured under his breath, his tone full of disbelief. The crowd utterly exploded. The amused smiles on everyone's faces froze in an instant, replaced by extreme astonishment and stupor. They had imagined countless humiliating endings from a begging for mercy, denying, starving, being captured, but they never expected that I would actually pay my taxes in full, even exceeding the required quality. The smug certainty on Wang Hu's face completely shattered. His complexion went deathly pale. His body trembled slightly, and his eyes were full of disbelief. He had lain in wait for days, expecting my downfall, only to have it land like a slap across his own face. I looked up at the stunned Zhao Qing and said in a calm, steady tone, "Sir, this month's grain tax has been fully paid. Please verify and record it." Zhao Qing snapped back to himself, hastily hiding his shock, carefully counted the amount, and picked up his pen to record it. His look toward me had changed completely. There was no longer the usual contempt or nitpicking, only deep apprehension. Someone who can casually produce 300 gene of refined grain in a year of famine is no ordinary pauper, and not someone he could easily control. The three behind me, Su Qingyuan and the other two, had warmth and pride shining in their eyes. Standing shoulder to shoulder at my side, they straightened their posture. The days of anxiety, unease, and doubt all vanished. They were finally certain they had backed the right person. I cast a cool glance over the stunned villagers and the sullen-faced Wang Hu. My heart was utterly calm. Paying the full tax today was only the first step in my comeback. All those who had looked down on me, mocked me, or coveted me would, in the end, only be able to look up at my height. 300 gene of polished rice landed firmly on the ground. The moment the government seal came down, the deadlock that had weighed over my head for a full month vanished completely. Zhao Qing put away the household register, his hands showing a faint, barely noticeable restraint. The look in his eyes no longer held an ounce of the arrogance or harshness of a petty official. In a barren year that required full delivery of grain rations, this was something the whole village hadn't seen in years. In a situation where everyone barely survived on roots and bark, my wealth and backing now far exceeded that of ordinary villagers, and even surpassed some small landowners. The grain inspection is accurate and compliant in full. Zhao Qing solemnly finished recording, his tone several times more polite. From now on, pay taxes monthly. Just send someone to report it. There's no need to appear in person and wait. Those words amounted to a de facto privilege, plainly indicating he no longer wished to be antagonistic toward me. After speaking, he hurriedly left with 2 constables. Not daring to linger, the village entrance fell into complete silence. The onlookers stood frozen in place, faces burning with shame and shock. All their previous mockery, certainty, and spectator attitude had, in an instant, turned into a hard slap across their faces. The worst off was Wang Hu. His face was a ghastly mix of green and white, his body stiff as he stood at the front of the crowd. The arrogance, jealousy, and certainty that had lived in his eyes were all shattered, leaving only endless dejection and panic. Countless times he had been certain I would fail or be exiled, had spread rumors to disparage me and the 3 ladies. Now every prediction had fallen flat, and he had completely become the village's biggest joke. I ignored the complex gazes of the crowd and turned to look at the 3 beauties beside me. After a month of storms and trials, their mindsets had undergone earth-shaking changes from initial vigilance, insecurity, and fear to the present calm, trust, and affection. Su Qingyuan's brows and eyes were gentle, with no trace of loneliness in her gaze. Chu Hua now had shed her aloof, bitter edge, her look clear and obedient. Wen Jiyu remained mild and serene, her eyes full of unwavering devotion. Along the way I accompanied them, protecting them from bullying and exile, and they repaid me with sincere hearts, gradually deepening the bonds at the bottom of their souls. Detected. 3 bound heroines' emotional states are complete. Bonds fully formed. Favorability max to 100 points. Ultimate max favor cashback bonus triggered. Unlocking top-tier opportunities in the wasteland years. Congratulations, host. Granted grain stockpiling permission. 1 million supplies cashback. Minimum family fortune of 10,000 sure of grain. Ultimate wealth buff. A continuous stream of system notification sounds detonated in his mind as richer rewards than ever poured in. The system storage instantly expanded. Rows upon rows of high-quality forage, daily necessities, coarse and fine grains, dried vegetables and meats were neatly stacked, totaling 10,000 sure supplies so abundant they could sustain hundreds of people for years without worry. In an instant, I completely broke free from the shackles of surviving the famine years, leaping from a barely self-preserving poor boy at the bottom to a top-tier wealthy man possessing vast stores of grain. A rich scent of grain subtly wafted from me, a faint fragrance blanketing the whole village entrance. The 3 beauties looked up at me at the same time, astonishment and utter devotion glittering in their eyes. They finally understood completely that the one they had followed was never a down-and-out pauper, but an unparalleled talent who could, in chaotic famine times, uphold a realm and command boundless wealth. Young master, you really did it. Su Qingyuan murmured softly, her tone full of genuine admiration. Chu Hua now nodded slightly and spoke calmly. It was I who was narrow-minded before. Now I am sincerely convinced. When Zia smiled faintly and charmingly. I will follow you for the rest of my life. Through wind and rain, never abandoning you. The three of them were of one mind, wholeheartedly devoted to each other. My system benefits stacked and increased again. And the material reserves grew ever more solid and abundant. The onlooking villagers finally came to their senses, and an uproar erupted. No one looked at me with even an ounce of disdain anymore. Only extreme awe, envy, and reverence remained. 10,000 dan of grain. This is truly unimaginable wealth. My heavens! With this much grain in a famine year, a lifetime 10 lifetimes wouldn't be enough to finish it. No wonder he dared to claim 3 noble daughters at once. No wonder he wasn't afraid of 300 gene of grain tax. Turns out he already possessed astounding fortune. Everyone clasped their hands in apology, and vied to curry favor. As if desperate to attach themselves and make connections immediately, all those who had earlier piled on and sneered now lowered themselves, groveling with the utmost flattery. Wang, who stood among the crowd, out of place, his face as white as paper, chilled to the bone, he looked at me. Lauded by the masses, at the 3 peerless beauties beside me, at the vast stores of grain capable of crushing the wealth of the entire village, and his heart filled with endless regret and fear. He had personally offended the person no one in the village could afford to provoke. From now on, he would have no footing in the village. I swept the room with a cold glance, calm and composed within, from surviving near-death traversal and being bound to a system in a desperate situation, to stubbornly resisting a bully's taunts and facing pressure from the authorities, and then paying full taxes and hoarding tens of thousands of stones of grain. I gradually shattered everyone's prejudices and overturned the odds time and again. In these chaotic, barren years, corpses littered the fields and human lives were worth less than grass. Countless people struggled and died in suffering, yet with the Goddess Cashback System at my disposal, I kept my beloved safe, held endless provisions, monopolized the region's food supply, and completed a total reversal, becoming the wealthiest in the area. From then on, unafraid of wind or rain, the famine years were no longer a dead end for me but the foundation for reaching the pinnacle of wealth and status. The 3 beauties and I would finally live peacefully through these tumultuous times, sitting on boundless riches and looking down upon the ups and downs of the world. And that's a wrap, folks. If this story gave you that sweet dopamine hit and was more satisfying than peeling the plastic off a brand new TV, do me a massive favor. Obliterate that like button and hit subscribe. I'm locked in the content mine, serving up fresh, ridiculously satisfying stories every single day. See you tomorrow for your next fix.